Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Cassidy Diamond. I am the Public Programs and Events Manager at IDA. And I'm really excited for this conversation this evening around Apple Plus's Dear docuseries. First off, I'd like to thank our interpreter here, who you see. It's Mara Bassani Santa Maria. I hope I pronounced that correctly. We thank you for providing this service for us today. I also want to take a moment before we get started to do a land acknowledgement, is how we like to begin a lot of our events here at IDA. I am coming to you today from Los Angeles. It is on the occupied land of the Tongva and Chumash people who have been stewards of this land for generations. We at IDA like to recognize the indigenous people on whose land we stand today. Just a few little housekeeping notes before we get started. You'll notice that the chat is turned off, but we are accepting questions for our panels via the Q&A function at the bottom. This program is being recorded. We will share it on YouTube after on our YouTube page. So that being said, if you, when you ask your question, we've been bringing people up on video to ask it in person. You're more than welcome to have our moderator ask the question for you. So just make that clear in your question when you submit it. All of our future events can be found at documentary.org. We have a lot more upcoming. We have 4 next week. Next Monday is our conversation around A Secret Love, moderated by Fortune Feimster, and we have a lot more great ones coming up. So check out our website for more of those. But you guys aren't here to see me, so let's move on to our exciting panel. I'd like to introduce Ella Taylor. She's going to be our moderator for the evening. She's a film critic at NPR. And Ella will come in and introduce everyone on our panel. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here. I gather in such numbers. I don't know exactly how many, but we all want to thank you first for giving us an excuse to dress up and put a bit of jewels and makeup on some of us, at least above the waist. So thank you very much for that. I want to start by introducing our panel. We have with us 3 executive directors of the series and 1 director. And I want to introduce them to you. First of all, R.J. Cutler, who's an executive producer on the series. He made the films The War Room and the September issue, among others. Executive producer Lyle Gamm, who is currently at CNN, and executive producer Lauren Hollingsworth, who's currently working on Masterclass. Randy Wilkins, who directed the wonderful Spike Lee segment. And we'll be talking to him as well. I beg your pardon, Randy. So RJ, I want to begin with you. And I know that the series was finished some time ago, so it was not a direct response to Black Lives Matter, but it streams now at a very opportune moment. Can you talk a little bit about the genesis of the show?
Of course, I'm delighted to. The genesis of the show is a meeting I had with my friends Zach Van Amberg and Jamie Ehrlich, who run Apple TV Plus, shortly after they started working on the service and programming it. And we were talking about what we might do together. And the question came up of whether there might be a project to do around letter writing. They had done some ads that had letters in them, famously these Dear Apple ads, and they asked if the idea might be the foundation for a series. And I went off and thought about it, and in kind of pondering the question. What I wondered was, in the expression of gratitude, in the articulation of how somebody's life had been affected by another life, could there be a television show? Could this idea that each of the work that we do, the deeds that we commit, the actions that we take, the beliefs that we have, when we put these things out into the world, and we impact other people's lives, could that be the basis of a story? And could we tell people's stories through the eyes of people whose lives they had changed through their work? And could the telling of those stories be in the form of letters? And I went back, and the concrete idea I had was, what if you had an episode? This was kind of our imagined pilot. What if people were writing to Bruce Springsteen about the way in which his album, The Rising, which was such a stunning work of art, had impacted them in the wake of September 11th and helped them kind of confront their own experiences with September 11th. And so I pitched the idea back to our friends at Apple, and they embraced it. You mentioned the moment in which these episodes have been dropped, and of course it is a kind of remarkable time in the world, and an important time, and a time that reminds us that we are all very much connected, and again, that our work and our deeds and our beliefs impact each other, that individuals can change the world and can bring about important change. And I think we find in the stories that we're telling through Dear that the work, that the stories that are being told about all of our subjects, whether it be Spike Lee or Misty Copeland or Oprah Winfrey or Allie Reisman, that the world can be changed by individuals, that we all are connected, and that our work and our deeds and our beliefs impact each other significantly.
Okay, thank you for that. And there are others in the series, including that great inspirer of all inspirers, Big Bird, who will be one of the series. Randy, I wanted to talk a little bit about your very fine episode on Spike Lee. And you've worked with Spike Lee for a long time, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, I was one of his students back in the day at NYU Tisch School of the Arts.
I see. And I think edited at least one of my favorite Spike Lee movies, She's Gotta Have It. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, I worked on the first season of the episodic version of She's Gotta Have It.
Oh, I see. I was going to say, you seem awfully young to have gone back
that far. Yeah, I don't go back that far.
Yeah, I do. And in regard, the introduction to this episode is very funny and very pointed and very lovely. And then you go through a whole bunch of different tones in portraying Spike Lee's biography and so on. Could you talk a little bit about the documentary techniques that you used to bring him to us as a person and a responder? Because it struck me that, Spike Lee is often very performative and quite confrontational, but the Spike Lee that you bring us here is much more reflective and considered and quiet in some ways. So can you talk about, as you were creating, what documentary techniques and sensibilities you brought to bringing us this very timely filmmaker?
I don't think there were any specific techniques that I employed. I think it was more leaning on a relationship that I've had with him for a long period of time. And I think it was more important to establish a comfort zone for him, establishing an environment where he could be vulnerable and open and comfortable experiencing those things. a lot of it just came down from one person speaking to another person that had a familiar rapport. And luckily for me, I had some inkling of his backstory. And over the course of my time with him, I was able to speak to him about things that weren't film related and build a relationship outside of a professional environment. So I think that all of those things mattered to him. I thought it was important that not only did he see me on set, but that he saw our DP, Daniel Patterson, who's a Morehouse alum and also an alum of NYU. So it was somebody else that Spike was familiar with. And I think the most important thing really was just making him comfortable and letting him understand that this wasn't going to be a confrontational interview, that we weren't asking him to give us his political beliefs or his view of the world, but we just wanted to talk about him and give him that platform and allow him to show the world a different side of him. And I think that comfort zone that was created for him allowed him to do that. And also being familiar with me helped a little bit, I would like to think. But there weren't really any techniques. I thought that the questions that we had for him were wide ranging, but again, it was about creating a safe environment for him to feel vulnerable and open and, kind of exploring the emotional side of him. And as you allude to, we don't normally get an opportunity to see that much, but I also don't think that there are many opportunities for him to do those things. So I think the simple fact that we weren't going to him to get his views on the latest current events, I think that also gave us an opportunity to explore a different side of him.
Yeah, it was probably very restful for him as well, because he's probably doing it night and day at the moment on Black Lives Matter, which ends his begins and ends his current film, The Five Bloods, as well. I've never heard him. I mean, you must have made him very comfortable, because I've never heard him talk about his parents before, and that was just delightful.
Yeah, again, I mean, I don't think he has many opportunities to speak about his family. And I know that he had a very close relationship with his mother. He lost his mother when he was young. And I think that, I wouldn't say that it's a sore subject for him, but I think it is a sensitive subject for him. And I think that he has to be in the right frame of mind and comfortable going down that road. And I haven't had many conversations with him over the years about his mother, but he does allude to the impact that his mother had on him as a cinephile and as a filmmaker. So I think creating the context for him to speak about his life and speak about his emergence as a filmmaker, his mom is a very intricate part of that. So I think touching on the things that made him such a lover of film and cinema, I think naturally it just goes to talking about his mom, and then clearly the love that he has for her starts showing out. So it's an interesting relationship that he has, not just with film, but also his relationship with his mother through film. So I think that love of film and that passion for cinema allowed him to open up a little bit to talk about his mother.
Yeah. And in a sense, one gets the impression that his father influenced his filmmaking too, because he couldn't stand movies because he thought they were racist. And that obviously is a very robust vein that runs through Spike Lee's movies as well.
Yeah, and it's funny that he talks about his father in that context, because his father has a major influence in all of the music in his films. And Spike is as passionate about music as he is film. He's his own music supervisor. He understands the language of music. When he speaks to his composers, he speaks to them as a musician. So his dad wasn't a big fan of cinema, but had a huge influence on Spike's career as a filmmaker just because of the music side of it. So when he said that during the interview, I almost laughed, because I know how much music means to Spike in all of his films, and that obviously goes back to his father. But yeah, it was interesting that he mentioned it that way. But I also think that leans a little bit towards his affinity for his mother as well. So
yeah. So was it his father, do you know, who suggested the Ride of the Valkyries Apocalypse Now sequence in the Five Bloods?
I don't know. I think that's Spike loves Apocalypse Now. He has a huge ceiling to floor poster of Apocalypse Now in his office. So I think he was just going to work that in somehow, some way for the Five Bloods.
It was wonderful, yeah. Lauren, if I can turn to you now and ask a little bit about what the guiding principles were behind the choice of people in each segment.
It's a great question. I think when many of the people in the series had essentially fan mail or had been contacted, people had reached out to them. And really, as we sort of gathered letters from all over the world and sifted through them, I think it became quickly apparent really when there was sort of a moment, a pivot point, a specific thing that really affected or touched each person. And I think one of the things that RJ brought to this, which I really appreciated, was that many of these the people who wrote these letters they weren't intimately connected with the person. They didn't know them at all. They were really 6 degrees or more of separation. And finding people whose lives had genuinely been touched, but who weren't friends or hadn't, necessarily worked with the person, was really, I think, one of the things that was very important, because it shows the breadth, the reach that these individuals had. And I think the other thing that's really interesting is that many of the people at the center of the series, who are famous for one thing, like Aly Reisman, I guess, is a good example, didn't start out to be activists. Like, they became activists. They through their own personal journey, went on a journey and changed. And Jane Goodall too, we tell this story about how she was not initially she was a scientist, and she gradually, her change into becoming an activist, and then how their own decision, their own sort of choice to follow that path had this incredible ripple effect. To borrow Aly Reisman's term, it's a ripple effect that spread to all these people. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, and I think that that's true of Misty Copeland too, who seems to have organically grown into an activist by virtue of both the triumphs and the adversities that she experienced with American Ballet Theatre. So yes, I take that. What
and
about
just to add on to that, what's interesting is that we made a series about these kind of prominent figures who have all accomplished so much and whose work is so well known. And we set out to make a series that explores people whose lives they've changed through their work. But we find in telling all the stories, and Lyle can speak to this too, but we find in telling all the stories that each of them had their lives touched by other people. So you understand that there is no Spike Lee without the people who influenced him. There is no Misty Copeland without that extraordinary woman, Cynthia Bradley, who volunteers at the Boys and Girls Club and discovers this 12-and-a-half-year-old ballerina who can't even afford to wear the proper clothes for the ballet classes and knows she loves dancing. And the woman is there volunteering and says, I think you're a prodigy. Come, I'll give you a scholarship to my ballet class. That's what's everybody's life, all of our lives, of course, your life, everybody watching this has had people in their lives who have helped them through inspiration, through their work, through their deeds, to become who they are. And that's why the ripple metaphor and what Lynn talks about when he says, everything you put out into the world is a pebble and it creates these ripples is such an apt metaphor.
Yeah. So Lyle, the Misty Copeland episode has 4 directors, as far as I could tell. Am I right about that?
That's correct. Yes.
Is it the only one that had 4 directors?
I think, some of the episodes, I would say the Jane Goodall episode was the first episode that we went out and filmed. And in putting that episode together, we learned a lot. And we learned a lot about how to make the letters work, how to interweave their stories with the stories of the letter writers, how to film the letters, what kind of letters to look for. Everything had to be very visual. To have this person walk through their life reading a letter, it had to be a very visual story that they were telling that unfolded, but it had to be in their words. So I think we learned a lot through doing that. And it ended up taking a very long time to put this together. And we would have to kind of go back and we realized we had to do some reshoots and change some things. So in doing so, unfortunately, some directors we had early on were not available later. And as the episodes went on, it became clearer and clearer how to make this work, because the show is it's a documentary scripted hybrid in many ways. It's very untraditional, and it wasn't a straightforward approach in how to do it at all. And then we had Big Bird at the end.
Yes, yes, definitely an inspirational figure, at least to my little one,
Right.
when she was little. But you know, were the letters solicited, or did they ask viewers to send in a bunch of letters? How did that work in terms of the selection?
We had a pretty large research team looking for these letters. Someone like Gloria Steinem has a library that's kept up at Smith College, and they sent us 1,000 letters, and we sat there and read them all. Oprah Winfrey has 4,000 letters at Harpo that we were able to get. Big Bird, we went to Children's Television Workshop, and there's boxes and boxes of letters, but they're full of 3-year-old drawings. So not a lot of opportunity for good letter writers there.
Yeah.
So we had a pretty big research team, and I think that we realized there was a lot of criteria to choosing those letters. They had to, like I said, be an active story that unfolded and had a turning point. And these people had to have real change in their lives. But they also, they had to visually work and be able to be interwoven to a point in the celebrity's life where they did something that would impact someone, so that we could have this crossing of boundaries. So we didn't solicit letters at all, but we did do a pretty thorough job, and we're pretty selective. And often we had to work with some of the letter writers to make some tweaks or adjustments to make sure that they would visually work as, you know, essentially scripts where they read the letters as their life unfolds around them, which was a challenge. And Randy can certainly talk about that in detail with, you know, Candice Wiggins and some of the letter writers he had in the Spike episode.
Yes, please do, Randy.
Well, Candice was interesting because when she came to us down in Charleston, South Carolina to shoot, she was reliving her experiences with her father. So she was having a very emotional time. So I guess when her father passed away, around the time before he got game came out, she had felt like she had put her father's death in its place, and Spike's film had helped her get to that point. And she felt that moving forward and being a WNBA superstar and being a successful collegiate athlete at the highest level, she thought that she had accomplished the goal of putting her father's passing in a particular place in her mind. But then when this came up, all of those wounds were opened up again, and she was really, really trying to figure out if the placement of her father in her mind was the appropriate one. So when I met her, we spoke for about 2 hours and really had a heart-to-heart. And she really told me how important this letter was to her and how equally important Spike was to her life. So I had one idea of how I wanted to approach shooting her letter, but as soon as we had that heart-to-heart, the plan went out the window, because it was by far the most personally investing story out of the 4 that we had. And obviously everybody was in the episode was impacted by Spike to a certain degree, but this was really, really a personal moment for Candice, and she was struggling with it. Like she showed up, she was crying within the first 20 minutes that we began speaking about Spike, but it went beyond Spike. It was really more of a family thing for her, and her relationship with her mother as well. There were so many things coming at her. So we had to treat that obviously with the utmost respect, but we wanted to incorporate that into her letter and everything that we filmed with her. So we really had to take a step back and make a decision. Do we want to incorporate all of this emotion? Because obviously you're towing the line of being a little bit too melodramatic if you have too much of it. So throughout the entire process and the couple of days that we spent with her, we were just gauging where she was emotionally, what she was comfortable with, what she wasn't comfortable with. And we wanted her to be a part of the process as much as possible. So we really treated her as a collaborator and not just somebody that we would tell, go to this spot and walk to X mark. She really gave us a great temperature of where she was that day and throughout the entire filming process. And I think we did a great job of capturing where she was in that moment. And it wasn't just about the letter, but it really was about her feeling these emotions as she was reading it and as we were filming. Because again, she was discovering things about her father, how Spike impacted her, her career arc. These were all things that she was either revisiting or learning things about as we were filming. So we had so many heart-to-heart conversations throughout the time that we spent together, that I think it just added an emotional layer to the episode that none of us anticipated would exist going into it. So I think that the format of the show really allowed us to dig deep into that and not just treat it as just a documentary, but really that hybrid that Lyle is referring to allowed us to build up drama in a way that you would normally get in a narrative format, and allowing Candice to really explore her emotions and do it in real time. So I think the situation with Candice really, or the scene with Candice, really highlighted how important this unique format was to the show and to the episode.
You know, and I have to say one of the pieces of feedback that we got from our friends at Apple when we were showing early episodes was it was such a mild adjustment, but I think it allowed just what Randy's talking about, which is sometimes when you see reenactments in documentary, they can feel different than what this felt. We still needed an emotional connection to the subjects. And we needed, for instance, to see their eyes and to feel their presence in it. And the notes we got encouraged us to do that more while avoiding ever feeling like we were in a reenactment. And it was, I think it's such a subtle shift, but it was very wise. And you see that in the Spike episode. It's so specifically shot to what the subject is speaking about and the subject's emotional connection to the moment, and you feel that emotion. It doesn't feel like some reenactment, like a person who has had this experience is kind of play acting it. It feels very real in that. So it's a reenactment that feels like it's documentary, and it's pretty powerful stuff.
So,
and just to add on to that, we were very aware of the fact that these were everyday people and they weren't actors. So we wanted to really showcase their humanity and the fact that these were everyday citizens that were impacted by people that you were considered icons or celebrities. So we wanted to treat them as everyday people that were living through this, but also had this special connection to these celebrities. So the humanity of each letter writer was really important in how we approached filming all of the scenes. So Daniel and I talked a lot about what's the framing going to be, how does the camera work in unison with these people, because obviously they're not trained actors also. So we wanted them to feel comfortable and not be aware of the camera. So our entire visual strategy was driven by those foundational tenets. And I think we did a great job of accomplishing that.
We have 5 minutes left of the panelists, and I just want to ask a slightly more challenging question to end with, and before we move to our audience questions. And that is, I grew up in England, and at that time the idea was don't get above your station and your social class. And I came to America because I wanted to get above my station. Here, it's completely the norm, the individualism, the idea that anybody can rise through their own efforts and the help of somebody else. And yet we also find ourselves at a very critical moment of American history where people are protesting because it's very clear that for most people, the achievement of that American dream is not a possibility. Even with a mentor, that it doesn't happen. And I'd like any of you to respond to that. No.
Can you speak? I guess I want to know what the question you're specifically asking is. I'm eager to speak to.
The series rests upon an individual rising with the help of another individual. and nobody wants to mention social class as such. We do have a lot of mention of poverty and so on, but the vast majority of people do not rise above their station. So I wonder if there's a slight skewing, you know, of perspective.
Well, the series rests on the notion that, and I've said this, the notion that one person can change the world, that other people are touched and impacted by our work, and that our deeds and our work impact each other, and that's what you see demonstrated in the series. So I'm not sure I think that's what you see so powerfully illustrated and so beautifully illustrated and told throughout all 10 episodes. Even with Big Bird, you see people whose lives are changed by the lessons he taught. And I don't know, I don't know necessarily what that has to do with class and limitations of a certain kind of class structure in a society, but I can say that I think there's a profound statement being made here about work and deed and art, that what you, and it's, again, it's something that Lin Miranda says so beautifully, what you put out into the world matters. What it says about what you believe about the world matters. And those things can change the world. Every individual's acts, every individual's deeds, their work can make the world a better place. And that is something at this time for us all to be aware of and for us to commit to.
Anybody else?
I would just add to that quickly that I think that there is a message about responsibility, that if you are one of the fortunate people, and I think Yara Shahidi, funnily enough, is one of the youngest people, and she has such a powerful message about her own responsibility that she recognizes and she owns and she gives out into the world, to play a role, to have a voice, and not only that, her own presence as an individual on a show like Blackish, just the mere presence of her there sends a message, such an important message. And I hope we see so much more of that. But I think there is a role about responsibility, and that it is in a sense a little bit of an indictment of individualism from some of the people who make choices, who make the right choice, I think, which is to RJ's point, which is that their message, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, of course, is one of those people, that their message, that their voice when people listen is very, very powerful.
I find in looking back at the episodes, I found so many times that the dialectic between love and hate seemed to be presented. It's in Randy's episode, it's in Lynn's episode, it's throughout. And we in this country are facing a moment where the choice couldn't be starker. We have leaders who preach hate. We have a president whose campaign his political ads were taken off of Facebook today because they used Nazi symbols, and so the choice is very stark. And there is, I think, a resonance between the fact that the work you put out into the world can make a difference, and also the fact that we are choosing between paths of love and paths of hate at this moment. I think there are rhymes there that hopefully are explored in the series. You know, one of the things the show also says, and I think is true, is on some level, all we can do is put the work out there and hope that it has a positive impact.
Okay, so now we're going to move to questions from the audience to the panelists. And the first question by Alex A., I'm going to read it out, is what criteria do the executive producers use to select directors to direct episodes?
I can take that. So again, it was a bit of a learning process with this. And these episodes, they required a lot of different skill sets. They required someone who could do a formal interview. They required someone who had some experience doing some scripted work. So they knew how to, because as I said, we the letters, the writing is real, but the environment was in many senses a scripted environment. So I think we were looking for people who had either, had a foot in both worlds, in both a documentary and a scripted world, like Randy has. Or we were looking for, early on, we had some commercial directors whose interviews were beautiful and the B-roll was beautiful, but the letters weren't exactly where we wanted them to be. So I think as we learned later, it became a very narrow criteria of finding people who were able to kind of go back and forth in these kind of indie film worlds and the documentary world. But the indie film experience certainly proved very, very useful for us as we went through the episodes and realized what the formula was. Mm-hmm. And the editors were crucial too.
Sorry, yeah. Lauren, do you have anything to add to that?
No, not at all. Actually, that was perfect.
Yeah, R.J.
No, as always, Lyle has concisely answered. Again, the form is a specific form. So finding the directors who have all the tools in their toolkit was what was necessary. And Lyle mentions the editors. There isn't an editor on the panel with us. We wish that they were all here, but we work with such extraordinary editors who are so gifted at storytelling and at crafting this work, and shout out to all of them.
The next question, and our last one, it comes from Nancy Dion. How did you choose each mentor, and did anyone say no? How did you pitch the concept? Them being so moved and touched is just so powerful. It just showed essence.
Well, what a beautifully put question, and thank you for it. I think that was one of the things. I'm curious what Randy, Lauren, and Lyle think, but one of the things certainly that surprised me was when we'd be sitting in interviews and the subjects were so clearly moved by the letters. You tend to think, someone like Oprah, she probably gets these letters by the bucketful every day, and she, when she has a minute, maybe she looks at them, and she's probably by now so over the fact that people feel their lives have been changed by her and are so grateful. And then you see her read one of these letters, and it touches her so deeply, and you are reminded that people do this work because of the connection it makes to other people. You're reminded what Oprah quotes Maya Angelou as saying, which is that your legacy is all the lives you've touched, and you see it, and it's so powerful, and so I'm grateful to the person who asked that question for recognizing that, because it was so important to all of us. But in the Spike episode, you see how touched he is by how affected by so many things. But the gentleman who's watched School Days 204 times. There's so many different instances of that. So did people say no who we asked to be involved? Well, I mentioned that we had that on the paper pitch, Bruce Springsteen was the idea we had in mind, and he had schedule conflicts, so he couldn't make it. And I guess it's safe to say that one or two others also passed. But by and large, we made a fantasy list of all the people we would like to have on the series, and all the folks who were in it said yes, and we were thrilled to have them.
Anyone else on the panel have something to add?
I thought it was really interesting to see Spike react to the letters, especially because he's somebody that, he believes he's a man of the people and doesn't have bodyguards and doesn't walk around with security and still takes the subways to and from Yankee games and, goes to the gym across the street from his house. So I think that connection, I doubt that he reads a lot of fan mail because he's pretty busy, but I think he understands and is aware of his impact on people. But to see or read about some of the specific impacts, I think he was taken aback. He was definitely, I think at first he was confused that somebody would watch School Days 204 times, and then it resonated. Then it resonated that this person went to a historically Black college because of school days. And he still watches this film even after graduating from an HBCU and then becoming a president of an HBCU. So I think that Spike made the connection as he continued to read the letter that, you know, the entire arc of this man's life changed because of this film, and he still always goes back to that foundational, inspirational moment for him to be of guidance for him, even as a president of a university. I think that really resonated with Spike, especially because education is so important to him. And again, it goes back to his mother being a teacher. And I think that moment became something that went even beyond the letter and the letter writer. I do think that there was a moment where he felt like, you know, he did something good for his mother by inspiring people to become educators and to go to HBCU. So I think not only was it a chance for Spike to read the letter and experience his impact, but also to reminisce on his own experiences and his own background. And yeah, I think it was fantastic. And I don't think he was expecting some of the letters because we kind of just handed it to him. He didn't have any heads up before of what the stories were. So yeah, I think they impacted him just as much as he impacted the letter writers.
I just want to add that, you know, RJ and myself and a few other people came up with this fantasy list early on of 15 celebrities that we would love to have in the show. And we were able to get 9 of them or 10 of them. And then Apple came to us and said, what about Big Bird? Would you consider doing Big Bird? And so that became a real challenge for us because at the end of every episode, Big Bird goes right back to where he was. You know, he's a fictional character. He's not a real character. His life doesn't arc. He's back to where he is every time, and he can't read. So we had the dual question of like, well, how do we do this with Big Bird? He's clearly influenced so many people, and a lot of people think he's real, but he's not. So that certainly created a lot of challenges for us. And you know, Big Bird definitely there's a voice there, and he has a real existence for you know 50 years on Sesame Street. And we were able to really tap into that and work with great partners over there to figure out how to make an interview with Big Bird and how to get him to read these letters and have a genuine reaction to them. So it was a challenge.
Well, I just want to thank our panelists very much for attending tonight, but also our audiences. I was about to say we can't go on meeting like this, but judging by the way the COVID cases are rising at the moment, we can, and we probably will. So please come back again and again, and thank you all very much for coming. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And thanks, Mara.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.